Episode 19, here we go. Today's conversation is with André Neves, the CTO and co-founder at ZEBEDEE. In our talk, we discussed ZEBEDEE's business, how it ties into virtual worlds or the metaverse, some of the early metaverse applications, specifically gaming, and how Bitcoin on the Lightning Network can be integrated into games to change incentives for both players and for their fans watching. We also discussed more technical concepts. André gave a great breakdown of LNURL, its history, how it works. We talked about Lightning addresses and the adoptions being seen across the Lightning ecosystem today. And we discussed bolts, specifically Bolt 12 and how that works. If you're enjoying the show and if you learned something new, the best way you can let me know is by sending in some sats or sending in direct messages using any Lightning podcasting app. My favorite one to use is Fountain. I read every message and I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week. Just a quick shout out before we get into the episode. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. I'll have more on Voltage later in the show. André, thanks for taking the time to chat today. How's your day going so far?
Hey, Kevin. Doing good. How are you?
Great. We've got a lot to cover. How about we start with ZEBEDEE's website? On the front page of the website, there's a big banner, and it says, powering real economies in virtual worlds. Can we start with a breakdown of what that means to you and how you kind of think of ZEBEDEE's business?
Totally. Great question. And the tagline really is meant to be broad to envision, what we believe ZEBEDEE is, the role that ZEBEDEE is going to play in the future. So we are a gaming fintech, and we focus on providing Bitcoin-based payment solutions and payment processing solutions for gamers and game developers, right? We both have solutions for game developers that need to power their games with Bitcoin over Lightning, as I'm sure a lot of the audience members here would know. But we also have solutions for gamers, which are the gamer wallets, the integrations with Discord and Telegram and so forth. Our vision really is that, which I think is important to touch on, is the notion of this metaverse, right? I think nowadays everyone likes to say the word metaverse, and it's now a buzzword that comes and goes, and it means everything, and yet it means nothing. I think this metaverse that everyone likes to talk about, what it really, really means is interoperability. It is not actually, this one single metaverse that exists and everyone is a part of. Why do I say that? Nowadays you have these big centralized companies like Microsoft, who actually just acquired Activision, in a massive $70 billion deal. You have Sony buying Bungie on the PlayStation side, and you have Facebook with Meta and their entire VR environment. These are individual virtual environments. These are advanced virtual environments. If in Microsoft's Metaverse A you have Microsoft Coin, and then in Meta's verse B you have Facebook Coin, and then in Sony you have the PlayStation Coin. These are not what we all want the metaverse to be, right? Because you're essentially just having slightly more advanced virtual worlds and virtual experimentations. In order to have a metaverse, you need to be able to move from one virtual world to another virtual world seamlessly. You can put that comparison into the real world today. If you travel from the United States to Europe, you have to do a currency conversion. You can't use your dollars over there, right? And vice versa. Now, the same thing is going to happen if we have individual virtual worlds that are just slightly more advanced virtual worlds. So they could be all-encompassing. That could be VR, XR, AR, but they still have their own value. They still have their own tokens, they still have their own money. The metaverse that we like to say is interoperability. And in order to have interoperability, you need a single medium of exchange, a single store of value, a single money, a single value that is used throughout, right? And that is what Bitcoin does. And so we believe that ZEBEDEE is the pipelines, the rails that will enable all of these virtual worlds, which can be games. It could be a virtual world like we are in right now. We can transfer 8K video, we can transfer audio, text, etc. But you simply cannot transfer value across the internet. And we like to say Bitcoin is magical internet money, right? So ZEBEDEE wants to enable such that all of these virtual worlds can power themselves with the same money. And then going from one virtual world to the other is simply pick up your bags and go to the next. Log in, log out over here, log in over there. Your identity would likely carry across, your value would likely carry across, right? So, and your money will carry across. So the beginnings of the metaverse really are dependent on interoperability. You can't, if we had an internet in the United States and an internet in Brazil and an internet in Europe, you wouldn't have the sharing of knowledge and sharing of information that we have today. So we need to have interoperability between all of these virtual worlds. And then, the notion of the real economies is because we believe that, virtual economies will very soon be and are currently becoming much bigger than real economies. When we say real economies, we're talking about, the GDP of a certain country in the world. You have massive virtual worlds like World of Warcraft, which has billions of dollars in economic value being transacted in there. And why is that interesting? And it's because virtual worlds don't have geographical limitations, right? We don't have the notion that I'm playing with a person that lives in Japan. I cannot talk to them. I cannot send them money. I cannot, interact with them. That's not the case. In virtual worlds, you can interact with anyone from anywhere at any time, right? It doesn't matter if it's night or day. The internet is available to you. So we truly believe that virtual economies, as Bitcoin scales, as Bitcoin gets adopted, it will power these virtual economies, and they will become much, much larger because they're not as constrained as real economies are. So we want to bring real economies into virtual worlds, and we want to be the pipelines and the infrastructure for that.
That's fascinating. I really like that analogy of like the currency swaps too in different countries. Right now, I just looked it up. Global GDP is about $80 trillion.
Well,
How, first off, I guess as a guess from your end, like how big is the metaverse GDP today, and what are some of those applications that are going to take it to, being larger than global GDP? Like that's a big number to kind of like tackle. What are those early applications that you're seeing success with?
Definitely. I think you can see some, use cases on World of Warcraft, the old days of EVE Online, which have massive, economies, which are these MMORPGs, right? Massively multiplayer online RPG environments, which, you have real worlds, right? That you can become your own self, and you trade and you interact and you battle and you have missions and you do guilds. I think it's, to your question, how much capital or economic activity exists in the metaverse today. I think, again, it brings me back to the point, what is that metaverse? Are we talking about Facebook's metaverse? Like, how do you quantify that? Because metaverse is like saying how much money is in the blockchain, right? But we all know that doesn't truly make sense if you understand what a blockchain is. And like, there are many blockchains, actually, right? We seem to think that Bitcoin is the only one that deals with money, but there's actually other blockchains. So when you say how much money or economic activities in a metaverse, it's really hard to quantify. I think what is likely to happen is, we will continue to see an evolve, like sort of advancements to VR, AR, and XR experiences, and you'll continue to see the blurring of the lines between what is real and what is virtual, right? We are in a virtual environment again, but nowadays we do this every single day. We get on a phone call and we get on a video conference and we do this. Is this not real now? Transacting money over Bitcoin, that's online and it's a virtual environment, but we do that in real life as well, in the real world. So I think these technologies will continue to blur the lines between what is real and what is virtual, and we'll continue to see that mix. And my guess is that I would like to say that we're already living in virtual worlds consistently every day, whether it's a 2D, let's call it virtual world like Twitter, where it's just videos and text and image, and you see that in a 2D environment, or if it's a full-blown 3D VR environment where you put a headset on and you can interact with people across the world. So I think we'll consistently and continue to move that direction. And with that, all the economic activity that happens in real worlds will begin to slowly shift. We've seen things like, in a slightly tangential, we've seen the growth of use cases of stable coins, right? This has grown tremendously over the past couple of months and years. So you can have your own takes on stable coins, but what the matter of the fact is there's a demand for money that moves faster in a digital realm. And this is what we believe Bitcoin and Lightning does in virtual worlds and specifically in games. So it's going to be an exciting journey, but I think I don't know that there is a specific single point or a specific single application that needs to be created to begin to migrate over to virtual worlds and such that virtual economies are bigger than real economies. I think it's just a step-by-step process. Yeah.
Do you think there are certain components of these virtual worlds? Like you mentioned VR, you mentioned AR, there's traditional gaming, there's maybe social media, if we could kind of like classify these different segments. Do you think any of those segments will be disrupting to other segments? Like will we eventually get to the point where everything is one, everything is AR, everything is VR, everything is kind of like in one component? Or do they kind of all work together at maturity?
I think it's interesting the real, in my opinion, the real metaverse that everyone likes to talk about, the real advanced world where you have real and virtual interconnected, is an XR experience. It's an AR experience, so it's a mixed reality experience. I don't think, and maybe I'll be wrong on this in 10 years, but I don't think virtual reality technology with a headset will ever give us the true presence in a virtual environment, right? I think there will always be things plugging to you, to your body and to your senses. So I would like to say that AR and XR, which are mixed reality and artificial reality, right? Augmented reality, sorry, those would be the big proponents. And I think that, the ideal scenario is you put in a contact lens that has a little thing and you can see VR environment things inside of your real world. I would hate if the future is a bunch of people with headsets on inside of their homes, and interconnected on this online metaverse. If you've seen the Ready Player One movie or even read the books, you may be familiar with that. That is effectively what that future talks about, and it's a bunch of people in their individual homes, and the world in real life is sort of dying slowly, but their world in virtual worlds is thriving, and they're spending quite a bit more time in virtual worlds. It's a tough topic, though. I think as ZEBEDEE, we're not dealing with AR, VR, and XR at the moment. I think there are game developers building on these experiences with ZEBEDEE software. But I think what we're trying to target is essentially, let's build the infrastructure such that the developers and the gamers and the players can come into the space, rather than just building games such that a handful of gamers can join, right? We're building the infrastructure for the next set of developers to build upon. So that's what, the future would like to see a little bit, I think.
Right. And when it comes to monetizing these experiences and like enabling money to flow through whatever version of the metaverse you believe will exist, do you think all of that then happens on Bitcoin, or is there any rule for, like you mentioned, stable coins? We're just coming off the heels of Facebook's shutdown of their DM project. Is there a role for something else other than Bitcoin, or do you think Bitcoin, as you kind of mentioned earlier, like makes it easier that you don't have to swap between different currencies as you travel to different countries? Do you think that's kind of like a winner take all?
In short, yes. I think money is not something that in history, money has been something that's been dictated by a ruling state or a ruling party, right? And it's sort of enforced onto the citizens of such country. I think now with Bitcoin we have something that is not controlled and not owned, and I think it's sort of all of the aspects of a new form of money that is needed in order to change perception Let me try and rephrase. I think Bitcoin is just an inherently new form of money, right? It is not the same type of money that we have had in this, like up until this point. So I think Bitcoin is a winner take all. It'll be in a world where 80% of virtual worlds and real world would accept Bitcoin. Why would you hold something else? Why would you have something else? If I can travel somewhere else in the world or go online or go in a virtual environment and all of those worlds speak Bitcoin, and why would I hold something else, right? So I do think it is, and I do want to preface that with something else. I think there's this distinction between traditional finance and Bitcoin as if they're two completely separate worlds, which they are. And I want to highlight that Bitcoin is not just better money, it is inherently better technology. From the technology sense, let's just put an example here. The cheapest thing you can do nowadays in traditional finance with a credit card is make an in-app purchase for like 60 cents on the dollar. And when that hits your account, it's around $1.10 because of fees and etc. We're talking about payment processing fees, we're talking about platform fees, we're talking about app store fees. So all of this adds up, right? And so you're trying to make a payment. So as a game developer, you say, great, I want to pay this gamer in France, 10 cents. Great. The bank comes back to you and says, great, is this gamer a criminal? Well, who are they? Where do they live? Right? And then, okay, great. It's going to cost you $3.50 in fees for you to send those 10 cents. Right? It is the fact that traditional finance is so expensive to interact with in a application sense has made it inherently worse technology than what Bitcoin is. With Bitcoin, you can send millisatoshis, as I'm sure you know, but you can go as, let's talk just broadly, you can go as low as 1 Satoshi, right? And that is I think it's 500th of a cent at this point. We're talking minuscule, and I can do that and it can settle immediately across the world without any conversion needed, without any permission needed. So I think it's really important to highlight that Bitcoin and Lightning, yes, they're better money, but they're just inherently better technology. You can remove the money aspect of it, and it is just better, settlement layers and payment networks that are, open and standardized and built to be interacted with any company, any app, any developer, any service provider, right? You just plug it in. So we really see Bitcoin as the winner take all future there.
Right. And it does seem people are starting to plug in Bitcoin into games. I just had on Jack Everett at Thunder Games last week, and he was talking about what he's integrating there and how Bitcoin plays a role. Can you speak to some of the interesting use cases people are using ZEBEDEE for, and like what are people using to, or how are people integrating Bitcoin into their games today, from your perspective?
Definitely. I'd like to touch on 4 points, if you don't mind. So
Sure.
the first one I think is important is, Viker Games. So Viker is a partner that is building games on the ZEBEDEE platform. They are a hyper-casual gaming studio. They build, hyper-casual mobile games. So imagine Angry Birds style games, right? So they have one called Balls King. They have one called Wheel of Trivia, right? So those types of games where you can play for a long time. What they've seen is immediately, as soon as onboarding ZEBEDEE services and platform into their games, they immediately saw a massive improvement in cost per install, so CPIs, as well as user retention, right? What are they doing? In hyper-casual games, usually you have what's known as the ad revenue model. They would put an ad and they would earn some on the user's, ad viewership there. So they haven't changed that model. What they're doing is a little bit of that ad revenue is now being sent back to users through Bitcoin rewards, right? So now what happens is the game is not only fun, it's not only entertainment, it is not only a pastime. It actually, all of that time that you're spending on it can actually have physical rewards that they're not guaranteed by any means, but you have the expectations of maybe getting a reward that is worth something. Now, I could give you 100 million gems inside of a game, and I guarantee you that the user will probably not necessarily come back. Right? They would say, okay, great, I have some gems, awesome. But if you give them 100 sats and they can actually take that out and they can do something with it anywhere in the real world, they could store it, they could keep it, they could spend it on Bitrefill, they could go down the street and buy it, depending where they are. that keeps them coming back, right? So Viker has seen a massive improvement on return on ad spend, upward, depending on the jurisdiction, upwards of 40 to 80%. And usually in game studios and game developers, a single digit improvement in return on ad spend can make it or break it, right? You can be a break-even game developer or game studio, or you can be a profitable game studio. A 40 to 80% improvement is mind-boggling. So we onboarded Viker in August of 2021, and in end of August, and then third week of September, they had their first game live on the App Store. So we're talking about a 3-week turnaround to implement something that is, as trivial as Bitcoin rewards to gamers. And the response has been so great that they went off, and now they have 9 titles, I believe, and they're going to move most of their titles to the ZEBEDEE platform this year. So that's been very strong use case for us, which is the Bitcoin rewards use case. I think touching a little bit more on the programmability of Bitcoin and Lightning, we actually have a proof of concept game called ZEBEDEE Kart. It used to be called Bitcoin Rally for those that have been around for a long time. And the idea there is we built something to showcase to developers what is possible with the technology, right? You can't just throw them a bone and say, hey, go and build something new with this. Developers aren't aware what's even possible. So we built ZEBEDEE Kart as a use case. What ZEBEDEE Kart does is it changes the dynamics of the game itself. So if you're familiar with Mario Kart, you have little coins that you can pick up, right? And those are worth points, and they make you go faster a little bit, and etc. But again, at the end of the game and at the end of the race, you walk out, and that's the end of it, right? There's nothing more to show for it. With ZEBEDEE Kart, the coins are actual satoshis. So, but whereas in Mario Kart you could throw, one of those skull-looking things and the opponent, and they can slow down. In ZEBEDEE Kart, you throw your coin. So now you're at an impasse, because do I keep my sats and then I get to the end of the race and then I cash it out, or do I throw the coin at my opponent to then get a better position in the lap? So you have this incentive structure that's like, oh, okay, interesting. We actually even had participants in the many tournaments we've held who would actually not care about placing. They would just go around the track and pick up all the coins because they know they were going to lose, but at least they were going to get some funds out of it. So that was another piece. So you can actually introduce Bitcoin and Lightning to the fabric of your game, like the actual coins in the game can be that. Building upon that, I think Counter-Strike, which is an integration we have through the Infuse platform, is also very interesting because, again, we are able to create this technology that, for example, we have this mode called survival mode. So you come in and you have 250 satoshis, and you come in, great, I'm part of the game, the server, and I start going around. And if you shoot me and you kill me as an opponent, the second I die, a Satoshi 3D asset coin starts spinning around on top of me. You have to now come and pick it up, right, for you to get it. But let's say you were far away. So you were far away and you shot me from far. And so now I don't get the reward for actually beating my opponent. I have to go out of my safe position and walk into the middle of everything, into the mix, just to get the reward. So now, you have folks using the coins as sort of like, bait, because I shoot someone and there's a coin now, and now I'm going to wait for someone to come in, right? So you actually put Bitcoin into the fabric of the game. And then last point that I wanted to make was you can actually turn, there's this notion of the barrier between an audience member and the players of a game, right? So we're talking a little bit now on the streaming side. If you think of audience members, they've always been passive. You're just watching, you're just looking, and you're like, okay, great. Then they added chats, right? Okay, now you can chat with people on the side. Then they added tipping, so now I can tip, and then maybe the streamer will see something and see that, hey, Andre sent something. With Bitcoin, you can actually, because it's programmable money, you can actually attach events, triggers, hooks into payments, right? So what we did with the ZEBEDEE Kart as well is in a streaming mode, you have a QR code on the screen, and anyone that actually pays that QR code, which I believe is 50 sats or whatever you decide it to be, will pull up a gauge, and that gauge, when it reaches the top, it throws what's known as a God mode, and it completely screws up everyone. So they become tiny characters, they go really slow, the first place gets moved to third place, and it all skews up the game for 10 seconds. right? So you can imagine that the audience members that were passive and just sitting there and watching are now directly affecting the outcome of the race and of the game through tiny, extremely fast, instantaneous microtransactions, right? And you can do that, and you can send a message as well. So it's very interesting when you plug in actual programmable money, the same way that the internet has done with information, where everything is data. We finally, with Lightning, we finally have money as data. So you can have money and information side by side in any of these interactions. So it's been very refreshing. We have a lot of games coming out this year. Unfortunately, I'm unable to discuss all of them at length at this stage, but just be on the lookout for a lot more game studios that have been building on ZEBEDEE that will be coming out in 2022.
This is mind-blowing stuff. How these incentives, you can like actually cause, real world incentives and real world like financial gain or loss in a game.
Think of I think of an example where like the mix between the mix between movies and games nowadays. You have movies that are built entirely on Unreal Engine 5, right? So these scenarios are very interesting, and I think what's cool is that with games, you can do things where the audience member can be the decider of where the player is headed. So let's say they're doing a quest and they get to an impasse and you have to go left or right. Now the audience member can impact with economic incentives. Okay, you should go right? And then the biggest, so then all of a sudden the player goes right, and you can trigger these events in the game. So that line between the experience and the gamer and the movie gets really blurred, and it's very interesting.
Yeah. Do you think this changes the way that gamers earn, like in the aggregate? Is this going to expand the number of gamers that can make a living from playing games? Is this going to build that gamer economy into something far larger than it is today?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've seen so far at ZEBEDEE is that, and of course this has played a bigger role in emerging markets, mostly given the currencies that exist in those countries. ZEBEDEE, as it stands right now, has a large Brazilian user base, and mostly because Brazil is a highly connected country when it comes to number of internet capable users, as well as it's just a slightly younger demographic. And so what we've seen with the Counter-Strike Infuse platform, for example, we host weekly tournaments, we host monthly tournaments, and we have servers running every day nonstop, right? We have players that are going out of their way to play Counter-Strike, which is a game they have already played. They used to play all the time already, but now there's actually the incentive because they make a little bit of Satoshis. We have people earning on a normal week without major events 200,000 Satoshis, right? We're talking about a couple $100 here or there. I'm not sure what the conversion rate there. Now you go to a country like Brazil where the currency is relatively weak compared to the dollar, and you times that by 5, right? So you're talking about 500 Brazilian reais, which is not money that will make you quit your jobs and everything, but it is significant money. What we've seen is a lot of people have actually, and you can see this on Twitter, we have a hashtag #ThankYouZebedee, where people are posting the things that they do with the sats they've earned in the many games that are powered by ZEBEDEE. So we have people doing simple things like buying Bitrefill gift cards and buying products online, but we also have people buying groceries, paying rent on time, buying gifts for people because they haven't been able to, serving X, Y, and Z. So it's really, exciting, and it, like, I wake up thinking that, great, I'm doing the best that I can to onboard people into Bitcoin in a friendly way, in a really good way, and then you get the added benefit of people putting out into the world, like, what you're building has enabled me to do this in the real world. That's very impactful for us as ZEBEDEE, and we really like to continue seeing that capability, right?
Totally. That's a huge number too, to have people who are earning over 100,000 sats for playing games. Are these primarily sats earned from other players?
It's a mix of two. So the example that I've been mentioning, which is the Counter-Strike integration with Infuse, what that player is, what we've built with Infuse is we allow for sponsors to come in and they sponsor the server itself. So they do that by, remember the coins that I talked about inside of CSGO? They have branded coins. right? So Bitstamp is a constant sponsor for us. They really believe in the future of Bitcoin and gaming. They actually have an integration with ZEBEDEE's with our wallet, right? You're able, as a Bitstamp user, you're able to log in with your ZEBEDEE wallet directly and move funds between the accounts. So what they do is we provide some ad banner space inside of the maps, right? We programmatically set those, and then we create the branded coins for them. So in a way, the gamers are coming in, but in this case, the sponsor is saying, okay, you need 200 sats to get into the match. Let me pay that for you. And they interact with the brand in a native environment, right? So it's not impactful, it's not intrusive. And then at the end, everyone comes out winning, right? Because they get the sats. We do have servers that aren't sponsored, and those are likely higher stakes, right? People don't want to earn, people that are putting in 100 sats likely want to earn quite a bit more. So we have those 5,000 sats, 10,000 sats, 50,000 sats. And those players are likely higher caliber because they're willing to put funds on the table. It's interesting because we had a tournament during Bitcoin 2021 last year, where we had, I believe it was 1.5 Bitcoin in rewards given out to players, where 0.5 of that was to CSGO and 0.5 of that was to the ZEBEDEE cart. We had a single person win a Mario Kart-esque tournament and walk out with half of Bitcoin. So it's very impactful.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. What are some of the interesting applications you think that are not quite ready yet, maybe haven't been built, but that you can kind of see forming on the horizon in terms of games or ways that gamers can earn money? What are some of those interesting applications that you're excited about?
What we'd love to be able to do is remove the distinction between the medium at which you're making payments from and to, which usually a lot of the times is your phone, right? You're carrying your phone and you scan a QR code, you make the payment, etc., and where the gaming experience is. So if you're on a console, right, a PlayStation, Xbox, and so on, you would need a native integration with Lightning for you to be able to make payments inside of those games, right? It's rare that you would be able to pull out your phone. If you're in a VR environment, you simply can't pull out your phone because the VR environment is a different environment of your phone. So what we'd like to do is pursue this notion of like pairing with a game, right? So we're actually coming out on ZEBEDEE. We're coming out with if you've ever used our integrations with the wallet, for example, you download the wallet, you start using the wallet on the phone. We have an integration with Discord. To log into that experience, you click a button on Discord and it shows you a QR code. So you scan that QR code with the wallet and you make that pairing happen. We're working on providing this for games and game developers such that, in a VR environment, right before you join the game, you can pair your wallet with the VR environment. And then once you put your headset on, in that environment, now your wallet is plugged to the game and you can allow transactions to happen and you can receive rewards on the go. We actually have a prototype for Beat Saber, which is, if you're familiar with the Beat Saber VR, it's one of those, you have like two swords and you have to hit them on sort of like Guitar Hero, if you're familiar with that. And it's a VR environment. And what we do is we actually have a prototype where every time you get it right, and you hit a block every time with a sword, you win 1 sat. And that sat gets immediately streamed to your wallet because it's paired with the game. So you don't need to scan a QR code. You don't need to wait until the end of the game or the race or the map for you to receive the rewards. You just have streaming payments because in Lightning, because we can do that and because it's paired with the game, right? I think that is one piece that will take everything to the next level, which is you come in similar to an arcade. You come in, you play. At the end, you take out your winnings. With streaming money, you come in and you earn the rewards as you play. You don't have to, the same way that you have podcasting 2.0 where you can earn based on the listening, you can have the same streaming payment functionality in a gaming environment based on the rewards that you're winning from the game. So if I punch you in the game, I want to take 1 sat from you and I want to receive that immediately in my wallet, right? And then you punch me and you get that sat back. And with Lightning, you can do millions, billions of transactions of this kind in a gaming environment. So we're very excited to be able to pioneer that front, and we have some prototypes that we're likely to show in the next couple of months.
That's really cool stuff. I want to talk a little bit more about the ZEBEDEE business and how you view the business evolving over time. Maybe it makes sense to split up the business into like 2 kind of buckets where you have like the gamers products and then you have the products for developers. How do you see those 2 evolving over time? Like, where do you think, what do you think the biggest revenue driver is for ZEBEDEE over time? Is it building products for gamers or for developers? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Definitely. It's interesting because in the beginning of Zebedee, we were very, very focused on developers solely. We were, in our view, we need to build infrastructure. Infrastructure. So we built the first versions of the APIs, the developer dashboards, the SDKs, and so forth. But the big differential there is we realized people need an easy way to enter this world, right? And at the time, of course, now there's very robust wallets that exist in the environment, in the ecosystem. But at the time, we didn't feel comfortable recommending anything and sort of partnering with a wallet. So we said, okay, let's create something that's simple. It is not meant to be your cold storage wallet. It is not meant to be your sovereign wallet. It is not that. We are not building that solution. If we were, we would be failing miserably. We are building solutions to onboard 3 billion gamers into the world, and they need familiar experiences, right? So they need to be able to click a button and log in with Google, right? They need to be able to see that experience that they're already used to in this new world. So we started building consumer-facing products for the gamers, and that has evolved, right? We have extensions on Discord, Telegram, Steam. We have browser extensions for Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge. But I think it's important to highlight that while we are a gaming fintech and we provide solutions to both, it's really that the gamers won't come unless there are games, and the game developers won't build unless there are gamers. So it's that really big chicken and egg problem, right? Which is like which one comes first? We're attacking both sides simultaneously. The team is growing and the platform's growing, so we're able to go after both customer segments. When it comes to the business side, Zebedee has a very straightforward transaction fee revenue model. We're taking 1% of all transactions that occur outside of the Zebedee ecosystem. So if you're sending from one Zebedee user to another Zebedee user, that is free, as it is with Venmo, Cash App, or anything of that kind. There's no need to monetize that. But if you're making transactions out of the Zebedee ecosystem into another wallet, into another provider, into another store, into another service, in the wider Bitcoin and Lightning Network ecosystem, we incur a small 1% fee on that transaction, right? What we've seen is that that capability paired with the ability to give game developers similar capabilities around taking a revenue of the transactions they allow to occur in their gaming environments allows us to thrive quite well on a projected business model. Right now, I would say if you were to say the biggest revenue share is likely to come from game developers because they're moving large amounts of money. If you have a game that has 500,000 monthly active users, your game is interacting with gamers and is powering it with quite a bit of funds, whereas a gamer would maybe make a couple hundred small transactions on a monthly basis, right? So it's slightly harder to monetize that. But what we see is that there will be lots of features that we're building right now in 2022 that are very geared for the gamer experience, that aren't necessarily just about how do we grow the business from the business model side. It's how do we make Zebedee's ecosystem the best ecosystem for gamers in this new economy to be in. And so there's a lot that I can't yet talk about, but it will be coming soon. But the wallet is getting revamped with lots of new features, right? The extensions are getting revamped, and simultaneously the developer dashboards and the APIs are getting quite a bit of a lift up and new features. So it's definitely a chicken and egg between which one comes first and comes next. With the current pipeline of game developers, I would like to say that we'll have plenty of games in 2022 built and ready, and the gamers will come en masse, and we'll likely see a big improvement in Bitcoin and Lightning adoption because of the gaming aspect of it.
Right. So I want to make sure I understand the developer side correctly. If I'm a game developer, I can implement your SDK, and I can take a small fee for my game from any transactions occurring in the game, and so can Zebedee. Is that?
Yeah,
right?
so Zebedee would take a cut, the flat 1% cut, and you as the game developer get to decide what you would like to. So just as any store, if you set your price for a good really high, your consumers will stop coming because it's overly expensive. So you now create this like economic incentive where fees are inherently a race to the bottom, right? You can't really battle that piece. So as a game developer, if you're setting a 50% fee on a transaction, gamers will stop coming. If you set a 30% fee, you're actually, funnily enough, you're matching App Store's levels, which is 30%. But if you set it to 1%, gamers will see, okay, that's fine. you're earning some, I'm earning some. This is an economic interaction. So you as the game developer are able to monetize directly on the revenue share by using Zebedee's technology. Yeah.
Where do you think this fee heads over time? Right, you mentioned like Apple charges 30% right now. That's kind of been it, before Bitcoin came along. And if you look at a lot of these kind of like Web 2 platforms, take rates across them tend to be in that range. Like I think
Right.
YouTube is taking like 45% of every
Wow.
ad dollar. Airbnb is taking, I don't know, 10 to 15, 20% of every listing. Apple's 30%. Do you think that across the board, Bitcoin enables this number to just dramatically drop, like by a factor of 10? Is that something that is reasonable?
I think Bitcoin finally provides another option. Right? I think you can't do these walled gardens and these gatekeepers have always been there, and there's been no alternative. And why is that? Because the alternative would be just another platform, and maybe then the other platform is giving slightly discounted rates or slightly less fee revenue here and there, but it's not competitive enough for the competitors to drive the fee that low, right? Google Play is not going to drop 20% fee so that Apple is forced to do that, because that's a large money maker for them. I think, again, inherently it's a fee to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom for fees, but because the large incumbents will likely be the last ones to migrate over to new technology. It always is, right? Just a side tangent here. Fortnite has V-Bucks, and they make $2 billion a year. I believe 2019 they made $2 billion in revenue just from the sale and interactions with V-Bucks. V-Bucks, you buy V-Bucks, but you can't take them out back to your dollars, right? It's always in. And so Fortnite has no incentive of introducing Bitcoin and Lightning right now, right? But if 60% of the rest of the market is now doing Bitcoin, they will slightly be forced to do so. So I think what you're likely to see is more and more disputes with gatekeepers and walled garden app stores. You've seen things with Epic Games. You've seen the battle, Epic Games and Apple. You've seen the battle with Spotify and Apple. I think those will continue to occur and will continue to drive down, that revenue. The second that the app stores allow for alternative payment methods, they have lost the plot. They have lost the ability to charge 30%. I think that is not actually too far off. I think it's optimistic to think that it's not too far off, but I'm optimistic about it. We think that the competition has grown, and the fact that there's now an alternative that doesn't require anyone's acceptance or permission makes the game dynamics quite a bit different, right, when it comes to charging 30%. If Bitcoin is charging 1%, that is a massive change. You're talking about a 29% margin that used to go to somewhere else. So I think the game dynamics will change, the incentive structure will change, but the incumbents are likely always the last ones to, innovate and adopt the technology. What's likely to happen is mid-sized platforms, game platforms and publishing platforms will likely want to innovate and differentiate themselves, and will be the first ones to adopt these sorts of things. So itch.io, for example, has millions of users. It is definitely no Steam. It is definitely no Epic Game Store. But it is one that is very prone to accepting something like Bitcoin and Lightning as payment methods, because it differentiates themselves and it allows for innovation and so forth. So to your question, yes, I would love to say that it'll bring fees down from 30 to single digits, but it may be a little while longer before Apple and Google and the big incumbents, are able to migrate over.
Right, and this ties back into your chicken and egg point, where you got to get developers building things, and you got to get gamers playing. Do you get the sense that right now those two sides of the equation are balanced, or do you get the sense that right now there are too many gamers and not enough developers, or too many developers but not enough gamers? What's the state of it right now?
Way more demand for games than gamers. So there's plenty of gamers ready and waiting and willing who play. We have gamers that play all of the Zebedee and Bitcoin powered games, including Thunder Games from Jack Havert, who you interviewed recently, every single day, many hours a day, and they keep consistently reaching out to support and saying, hey, how can I play other games? Like, what other games? Just give me more games, and the games are coming. The difference is usually an app, you can build something like what's known as an MVP, right? A minimal viable product, and an app in 2-3 months and you can push something out and iterate on it. With a game, you can't really build the first few parts of the game. You have to build the full game experience, and that takes much longer. You don't build a full-fledged game in 3 months. You build that in 12 months. So it does take a little while for games to be released and so forth. But there's definitely lots of gamers, and that's what we've seen, and we are able to show to business, development partners and potential game studios that are partnering with us, like, this is the demand for it. Here's a new market and audience that is untapped and completely different audience from what you currently tap into, and they're ready and willing and eager to play. So I think the number of gamers will just continue to blow up, and the game developers will see that as a big driver. Couple that with the improvements in return on ad spent, in cost per install, in cost for user acquisition, in user retention, and it's a no-brainer for any game studio to just say, yes, why would I not adopt this technology? And it's entirely up to them if they power the entirety of their game economy with Bitcoin, or all they're doing is like, here's a little bit of a reward, right? It's up to them. They can do it in whatever way, shape, or fashion they want.
And I guess it's a similar dynamic as, early Bitcoin buyers, where the rewards will accrue to the ones who kind of step in first and kind of like make that first move to integrate Bitcoin and kind of like build a community around Bitcoin rewards.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. I mean, Thunder Games is a great example of that, right? They've now released, I think, 3 or 4 games, and they have a community of followers, and it's great. And they all love. They have the one sat gang that I think is hilarious too. So all the Zebedee games are seeing a lot of the similar interactions.
Awesome. Okay, now I want to kind of shift the conversation to the technical side of things, because I know you're doing a lot of cool work on Lightning addresses. I want to talk about LNURL. I want to talk about bolts and bolt 12. We can get into all of this, but maybe the first place to start off is give people an understanding of what LNURL is.
Sure.
Where did it come from, and how is it being used today?
So I think it's important to highlight 2 points. I think there's been a lot of discussion of LNURL as if it's one single thing. LNURL is actually a set of standards, and you may be familiar with a few of them. You may have used them without even knowing that you are using them. So the first one that I think was pretty sizable was LNURL channel. So in the early days of Lightning, you needed to get someone else to open a channel with you, right, to you for liquidity purposes. So there was a protocol created by Anton, who's the developer of Simple Bitcoin Wallet, as well as the folks at Bitrefill with the Thor, I guess it's called Turbo channels, I guess. And they created this LNURL channel, which was basically an HTTP standard that allowed 2 partners to talk to each other and open a channel to each other. Basically, I'm paying you to open a channel to me. Great. This was probably the first one, if I'm not mistaken. The second one that came up was LNURL withdraw. So if you've ever scanned the QR code and received Bitcoin, right? So you scan a QR code and receive Bitcoin, that was using LNURL withdraw, right? That is not possible in Lightning right now. You can't scan a QR code and receive payments right now at the moment. That has to be LNURL withdraw. Most people don't really know because it's a QR code. It looks like every other one, and all of the wallets support it. So you point the camera to the QR code, and it handles everything for you. But really what that's doing is a handshake between your wallet and the server, and then they're saying, okay, give me an invoice, and then it's being paid on the background. So that's the second one. The third one was LNURL auth for authentication, which specifically that one doesn't need to be tied to Lightning, but it was sort of built upon the LNURL scheme as well. And this is used for you to basically log into services using a public-private key pair. And in this case with Lightning, people are using their wallets public-private key pairs to log in. So you have services like LN Markets, you have services like Collider, which are allowing you to do this, log in with a public-private key pair. That is also LNURL specification. And then the most recent addition, which has already been added for a long time now, but given the recent developments of Lightning address, which builds on top of this, is the LNURL Pay. So the LNURL Pay is essentially a more robust payment QR code, and it has some certain capability. So LNURL came out of the need for better user interactions between wallet users and service providers. Okay, and a service provider in this case is a store, a website, a game, like something that has a presence online, but needs better experience. So let's go through a flow here. If as a service provider or as a game or as a company, I'm trying to pay you as a user over Lightning, the only way to do that is if you give me an invoice, right? You have to. So now the user experience right now without LNURL is, hey, Kevin, please create an invoice, but don't create just any invoice. Create an invoice for exactly 555 Satoshis. Copy that invoice, make sure it does not expire, and then send it over to me, and then we will, verify that that's the right amount, and then we're going to go ahead and pay you that. That's a horrible experience for someone that's just joining, right? Imagine that's the experience for someone earning from a game or earning from an app. So it came out of that, really. LNURL is a Lightning Network URL specification. It bridges the orchestration of invoices from two parties on the HTTP layer. And there's a lot of controversy around using HTTP, which is interesting because the entire web uses it, right? RESTful APIs are everywhere. It's literally the most standardized standard ever, HTTP. And if we want Bitcoin to be the money of the internet, right, it's magic internet money, it needs to, in some way, shape, or form, plug into the internet. Like it has to, right? It has to be simple, easy, straightforward. If we have these two separate worlds of Bitcoin, Lightning, and then the internet, and there's no easy way to merge or pass information between them, it makes for development quite complicated, right? So what LNURL is it's simply something that has been built with multiple participants. This is not something that a single person or a single company has created. There's plenty of people in Telegram discussing this on a daily basis. And what it is, it facilitates interactions between two parties, specifically a user and a company, or a user and a website, a user and a game, a user and a service provider, right? So that's the birthplace of LNURL and why it came about. And it basically just orchestration of invoices back and forth between these two parties.
And am I right to think that this then lives off of the Lightning Network protocol, right? It's not integrated into the protocol?
Correct. Yeah, this is very much people like to say the layered approach, right? Layer one is Bitcoin. You have layer two, it's Lightning. It's definitely above Lightning. It uses the Lightning invoices, right? So let me try and explain. What LNURL is doing is it's basically saying, give me an invoice, and then passing it to the other side. The payment is still done on the Lightning side, right? The payment is done on Lightning Network. Everything is the same. It's just the orchestration of the invoice being sent between two parties. So it's definitely on top of Lightning is one way to visualize it.
Makes sense. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of how LNURL came to be, talk to me about Lightning addresses and how they tie into LNURL and what they enable.
Definitely. So okay, a lot to unpack here. So I just want to give a little pretext. So the user experience right now for a user using a Bolt 11, which is the normal Lightning invoice, right? You make a Lightning invoice, it's the Bolt 11 invoice. There's two parts of it that are essential to the network, but create for pretty limited user experience. The first one is that they're single use, right? So you're supposed to use an invoice and not use it again. Technically, there have been some advancements to disallow that piece, but let's just assume that for now, as it stands right now, you pay a Lightning invoice, it is done, it's single use. Second, it's the expiration time. Again, it's on purpose, it's needed for the network because otherwise you have funds locked up in routes, but invoices and HLCs need to expire, right? They need to expire at a certain time. This creates for great user experience if you're making a single payment experience. So let's say I add a bunch of stuff to my e-commerce cart, I click a button, and then it shows me QR code, I pay it, that's the end, right? And that's fine. That experience is not optimal for users that are making multiple payments in the same time, or multiple people are making the same payment at the same time. So an example, if I'm a famous streamer or online person and I want to receive tips, donations, or whatever, I cannot put a Lightning invoice on my stream, because what the experience will be is, out of 10,000 people, 9,999 that attempt to pay that will fail and one person will succeed, right? That's a horrible experience. So what came out of that was LNURL Pay, which again is just meant to be a payment interaction, but it gives you more capabilities. So it gives you things like you can set minimum and maximum amounts. So you don't have to say, I want 555 Satoshis. You can say, I want between 10,000 and 100,000. You can send me anything, right? This QR code will allow you to send me anything. You can actually send messages across with it, so comments or messages that get received on the other end. And there's additional metadata here and there. But basically what that LNURL Pay QR code enables is a static QR code, a QR code that can be reused and reused and reused for different payment amounts from different people at any point. So you can put that on the stream and that will be fine, right? And the 10,000 people can actually make the payments. Now, that is great. QR codes are great. They're ephemeral, they're the same. Every wallet can handle QR codes. It's easy to understand. You know that you have to point the camera to it and do it. But we go back to the point where we're trying to onboard 3 billion people, 3 billion gamers into this world. And specifically when it comes to Bitcoin and Lightning, we're not even talking about gamers only, we're talking about the entire world. We want to onboard the entire world into Bitcoin and Lightning. Usually users need a 10 to 100x improvement on the user experience or the features or the capabilities of such technology in order to change behavior, right? So right now, if I go to Starbucks and I take my Apple Watch, I will order and I will simply tap my Apple Watch and I have paid for my coffee, right? Even though there are advancements in NFC for Lightning, you simply cannot compete with that experience of tapping your watch, because what's the experience right now? Let's say the person shows me a QR code. I pick up my phone, I unlock it, I open the wallet, I wait for it to load, I swipe to the camera, I scan it, I confirm, I wait 2-3 seconds for the payment to clear, voila, I paid for it, right? The experience is not yet better in a real world environment. So how can we improve it further? Let's maintain the capabilities of the LNURL Pay, which is multiple payments, static QR code, ability to send multiple amounts, send messages, and etc. But let's make that easier. So instead of you having to know or print or give someone your QR code, let's map that QR code into something that's readable, that's user understood, right? And the easiest way to do that is, again, LNURL is already on the HTTP layer. It's already on the web RESTful API layers, right? So what we did is we created the Lightning address, which is effectively a map between a LNURL Pay to an internet identifier. So an internet identifier is the most famous one that you've seen, is an email address, which is, kevin@kevin.com, right? It's user@domain. And you can have complaints about the fact that DNS is a centralized solution. You can have complaints about how the web and internet service providers are centralized solutions. That, I agree with those statements and arguments. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't attempt, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't build better experiences. DNS is used all over the world. If there was a better alternative, I'm more than willing to support it and interact with it, but there really isn't yet. There's Tor and Onion routing. There's some additional capabilities on some other standards, but as it stands, what it does is you can have kevin@kevin.com be your payment identifier, right? So you have a Lightning address, which is kevin@kevin.com. You own the Kevin domain. You have the Kevin user, and so André, now I need to pay you, right? So we go back to that question. Let's say I'm a service provider, or I'm a gamer, or I'm a user, or I'm another person. I'm trying to pay Kevin. How do I pay Kevin? I need to either, find you on a platform and then ask for an invoice from you, or I need to find a static QR code that you have somewhere, or I need to ask you for a Bitcoin address, right? Like, it's always interaction, right, between the two parties. I don't have, and with emails, I don't need to ask you anything. I can just find your email and I just send you a message. If you choose to ignore it, that's your choice. So Lightning addresses solve that discoverability piece. I no longer need to ask you for something. I get to say, hey, I'm going to send a payment to kevin@kevin.com, right? So that's what Lightning Address does in the discoverability piece. But specifically, now I want to just touch on the Zebedee side. Why is it interesting for us? We consume open networks. Zebedee uses the open network of Bitcoin, the permissionless network of Lightning, right? We use those networks. It would be a shame for us to use the networks and build upon it, but then create entirely centralized solutions on top of it, right? So an example, every Zebedee user has a Zebedee gamer tag. So Zebedee gamers can send from one gamer tag to the other just fine, just as you can with a Venmo user to another Venmo user. But between a Venmo user to a Cash App user, you can't send funds, right? You simply can't do that. Both of them speak dollars. Both of them speak the US dollar, but you can't send funds to each other. So what happens is you don't have interoperability between service providers. So they speak the same language, but they don't talk to each other. With Lightning Address, again, Lightning Address and LNURL are simply HTTP standards. Anyone can adopt them, right? So Lightning Address brings interoperability between service providers. So whereas right now, for an example, Coin Corner is a UK-based exchange, right? They have Lightning Addresses enabled. For someone at the Zebedee platform to send a payment to someone at Coin Corner, you would, again, hey, Joe, can you please give me an invoice so that I can pay you, right? That would be the user flow. Now I don't need to do that. Now I can go into the Zebedee wallet, I can click a few buttons and I can type joe@coincorner.io, and I can make the payment. That was impossible before Lightning Address because the two service providers were not interoperable. We build systems differently. We have different solutions, right? The only interoperable piece was the Lightning network side. Now on the HTTP layer with Lightning Address, we're interoperable. So Lightning Address solves discoverability issues and it solves interoperability issues for providers. Any provider that supports Lightning Address can now send to any provider that supports Lightning Address. So imagine a scenario where you had Kevin at Venmo.com and Kevin at CashApp.com. Now you can send between the two of them, right? That's a very, very powerful thing. And we're just seeing this being adopted by just about every platform, every piece of software in the industry. After the release in August of 2021, I believe it was by October, 80% of all the wallets had some support for receiving or for sending, or were engaging in that capability. Now I would say it's more like 95%. There's a handful of wallets that don't yet support some of it, but I imagine they will in the future. So that's what Lightning Address is. It's building very simple, familiar user interface that the next 4, 5, 6 billion users can see and say, someone who's used to sending emails can now interact with Bitcoin. Do you know what I mean? That's like how simple it is. Now, if they want to go down the rabbit hole, great. That was just their introduction to it. Now they can go down the rabbit hole and perform the learnings and learn about this and learn about cold storage, learn about Lightning channels and so forth. But we need to bring them in, and the first experience for them can't be a 24-word seed phrase because they will close the app and go away. Something that looks like an email is very, very friendly for them. That was a very long way of answering the question, I think.
No, that's really good stuff. And I definitely can see that every app that not every app, but a lot of the apps that I've talked to have already implemented Lightning Addresses. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be dominating the conversation on Lightning right now. Like there's just a lot of enthusiasm about it. Do you have any either metrics or insights, or this could be either from the Zebedee side or from people who are using Lightning Addresses outside of Zebedee? Do you have a sense for like how much usage Lightning Addresses are getting today versus QR codes, like as a percentage of or something?
I don't know that there would be such a metric. I understand the question, and I would love to have data to point to that. It's really tough to gather that information. What I would say is a lot of newcomers to the Zebedee gaming ecosystem are now, their first introduction to Bitcoin and Lightning has been through a Lightning address already. And I think that person, they are much more willing to bring others in because it's an easy experience. So I guess in the Zebedee side, we've seen users that have quote unquote migrated over to the Lightning address way of sending and receiving because it's very easy and it's simple and so forth. I can't say that QR codes have been displaced and everyone's using Lightning address though.
I think the current scenario is it's improving and folks are adopting it. It is still, however, nascent and early days to say that it is the way to make transactions. What I'm very excited for, and maybe this is a good tangent into this, is the new things that folks are doing with the Lightning address. So, as a builder, it's very interesting as a technologist builder. It's very interesting when you build something and you architect it and you make it's like a little square, right? And it's perfect and it does X, Y, and Z things. And then you put it out into the world and you release it and someone grabs that square and throws it across the room. And then you think just, no, that's not what you're supposed to do with this. And they say, I don't care, it works and I want to do it and it's perfect. So what we've seen is people have taken that Lightning address and like gone so far on stuff that we haven't even thought of. So let me talk about some examples. One is,
sure.
And I hope I'm not, saying anything that I can't say, but we have exchange. So there are exchanges which are publicly talking about this, so it's fine to discuss it. So BitNob is introducing support for Lightning address and will be releasing very soon. They're a Nigerian-based exchange. They took it even further where, their users all have Lightning addresses, that's fine. But what they did is the same way that you can have your email address be kevin@kevin.com, but you can host that email address on Google infrastructure, right? So you're using Gmail, you're using Google Calendar, you're using Google Drive, but you're not using @gmail.com, you're using @kevin.com. BitNob is providing that same capability with users' domain. So you don't have to have kevin@bitnob.com be your Lightning address. You can have kevin@kevin.com be your Lightning address, powered by BitNob, right? So now you have a Lightning address infrastructure provider, which is, wow, hadn't thought of that. Great. There are other parties that are doing instant FX on the Lightning address. So an example, you would have kevin@kevin.com as your main Lightning address. But if I send you payments to Kevin, USD at kevin.com, as your service provider, in this case an exchange or whoever is backing that up, sees that payment and immediately converts that into USD and sends it to your USD account, right? So now we're using Lightning as the rails, the Lightning and Lightning address as simply the rails for the transaction, and it's fully interoperable with just about any other provider. But if you append, USD, you can do that. We have folks that in Ukraine have taken the Lightning address and created this way. So if you have kevin@kevin.com, that's your Lightning address. But if you have Kevin, 917-333-3345, and it's your phone number at kevin.com, once you do that and you make a payment to it, the provider is automatically taking that and depositing it as credit on your phone number, right? So you can see how this becomes highly, highly programmable, where you can have Lightning addresses automatically doing things on behalf of the user based on the payments that are being received, right? So that's very, very interesting, and it's something that ZEBEDEE is just like, whoa, hold on a second. I just put this out in August and you guys already took it so much farther than us. We have other providers that are creating anonymous addresses. So instead of having kevin@kevin.com, you can have, 1257@blah, blah, blah.com. So you can use it for purposes of, you don't want to dox yourself. You don't want to say who you are. You can now have a secondary email address, right? So you can now have a Lightning address that's secondary. So it's very exciting what's happening. There's a lot coming through. But yeah, it's always interesting when someone takes something you build and just blows it out of proportion.
Yeah, you got the idea wheel spinning in my head right now. One other idea is because it's an email address, basically like kevin@kevin.com. Why is there no email client built, or is someone working on this where I can read all my emails through, and emails can be sent to kevin@kevin.com, and maybe I can put in a spam filter and say, hey, you got to send 10 sats if you want to reach my inbox.
Kevin, next time you're reading from my brain and from our product roadmap, let me know so that we can be aware that we're going to go through this. But that is in 100%, you can build the hash cache, right? The one way of doing hash cache is like, hey, you send an email to a Lightning address and it's like, hey, this is a Lightning address, pay 10 sats to get it forwarded. And then you forward it and voila, right? Now you create a spam filter based on sats. Yes, that is very much a possibility and something we're exploring. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm so excited to be using that. I'm thrilled. Okay, I know we're running out of time, but I want to get to the discussion about Bolt 12 because I hear a lot about on Twitter, LNURL and Bolt 12. They get put together in the same conversation. We had a chat, and he said it's not really like a one-to-one apples to apples comparison. So maybe can you help me understand what is different about Bolt 12, and maybe even if we want to start, what are bolts to begin with?
Yeah, so that's a great start. I think BOLT stands for Basis of Lightning Technology, right? So when the implementers of the many Lightning implementations came together, defined the spec and the process, they decided that we're going to follow these 11 bolts. It's sort of like these 11 rules. And if your implementation supports those rules and does everything those rules say that you have to do, you are now in an interoperable, compatible Lightning Network implementation. The story is that every single piece of information in the bolts has been implemented in at least 2 implementations. Okay. At this point, all 11 bolts have been implemented by all implementations, but anything that is to be a bolt has to be implemented in at least 2 implementations. Okay. So that's basically what a bolt is. And as much as people know that Lightning moves fast, the bolts don't change that fast or that often. Lightning was built in a feature optionality way. So you have these things called feature bits, and your node can say, hey, I support feature bit 7, 12, 27, 45, right? And then other nodes will know what features your node supports. So this is the path to, feature optionality in the future. But what happened is very recently, and maybe this is worth touching on, is the notion of a blip, right? So in Bitcoin, you have what's known as a BIP, Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, and that's basically how you go about introducing changes to the Bitcoin software. You go through a BIP and there's discussions, there's back and forth, you have to change it, refactor, improve, and so on. Eventually there's a code implementation, there's a PR that's raised against Bitcoin Core, lots of tests, and then it gets merged, right? That would be a very simplified way of viewing the process. With Lightning, there hasn't been a way to do that because, an example, LNURL is not a bolt, and it shouldn't be. It is not core Lightning piece of infrastructure. But it is also, what is it? It's just a set of standards that exist. So we have the LNURL RFC, which is just a repository with all of the LNURL standards. Now, there are other Lightning things or implementations or things that have been created that aren't part of Bolt and that deserve a place to implement, to discuss for folks that are doing similar things, to talk about their implementations, right? So an example is KeySend. KeySend in LND was implemented, and then C Lightning added support for it, but there wasn't a true specification that said like this is true KeySend. Technically, there was one in the Lightning network, in the LND side of things, but it wasn't a bolt, right? It wasn't a blip, right, or a BIP. So another one would be the podcasting 2.0. There's plenty of platforms and they may do it slightly different, right? You can talk about trampoline routing. You can talk about hosted channels, right? These are all things that some implementations and some teams are interacting with and experimenting with, but there's no place to put them, right? Where do you place this? So that's where blips came in, and blips is Bitcoin Lightning Improvement Proposals. And it is different from a BIP in the sense that it is not something that, if a blip gets enough adoption, it will be made part of a bolt. It is not necessarily that way. To be very honest, there isn't a clear path from something that's a blip to become a bolt. I imagine once it gets enough traction and is implemented in multiple implementations, I guess there's a discussion to be had whether it becomes a bolt. But that's the distinction between a bolt and a blip, right? Right now, there hasn't been any other bolts other than the first 11 that were created in the beginning. There have been certain changes, certain refactors, certain improvements. With the recent blips release, I think there will be more discussions around blips and implementations will be built. And, maybe in a world where LNURL was to be conceived right now, today, it most likely would have been a blip, right? I would say that. A question that I have is, if Bolt 12 were to be conceived today, would it actually have been Bolt 12 or would it have been a blip? I'm not sure. What is the distinction between the two? When it comes to, so that's a little bit on bolts and blips. And so I'm excited to see what comes out of the blips discussions. When it comes to bolts 12 and LNURL, which is the general discussion around, Twitter and general, Bitcoin Twitter, if you will, you're comparing apples and oranges in the sense that you're saying LNURL is equal to bolts 12 in its feature set, and it's not. So as I explained in the beginning, LNURL is a set of standards, and it does so much more than bolts 12 because it is not just one thing. It is multiple standards, right? We have the authentication standard, we have the channel standard, we have the withdraw standard, we have the pay standard. Bolts 12 is on the Bitcoin Lightning layer. LNURL is on the HTTP layer. Where I think conversation gets mixed is folks aren't aware of the technicalities between the two implementations, and so they just bundle them together and say LNURL versus bolts 12. They serve different purposes, even though they may do similar things. My belief is that LNURL use and over the past 2 years has helped indicate where bolts 12 should be or will be headed to. So an example, offers, which is the bolts 12 specification, allows for the creation of a QR code, and that QR code can be used to pay someone, or it can be used to receive funds from someone, right? You could say that that's a comparative feature to what LNURL pay and LNURL withdraw do, right? You could make that comparison. I think there are certain things that sort of beg questioning. I think there's that notion of a slippery slope. So let's say, great, we bring bolts 12 into fruition, and it is implemented in all the implementations and it's supported. Great. So now each and every service provider, each and every wallet, each and every user needs to now adopt bolts 12, right? So it's not something that you turn on and suddenly it happens. So there's a distinction there. I think it is much easier and faster to iterate and implement something like LNURL because it is on top of Lightning, whereas bolts 12 has a lot more challenges to being integrated and implemented. I think there's a lot of nuances around the implementations themselves. LND is by far the most used implementation in the network, and they don't actually seem to want to or have plans to support bolts 12, even though you have C Lightning, Eclair, and Rust Lightning who have said they will be supporting it. So now let's assume that maybe 10% of the network supports bolts 12. Great. If you show me a bolts 12 QR code, my wallet that's running LND doesn't understand it yet, right? So you now have fragmentation, and that's confusing for users. I think coming back to the slippery slope piece, one of the key points that is dependent on bolts 12 is the notion of onion messages. So in Lightning, when you try to make a payment, there's this onion, right? And the HTLC, and it sort of every hop, you unwrap that onion. That's one way to think about it. And there's always a fee that is incurred, right? When you make a payment, there's a routing fee incurred. So the incentive is there for nodes to become routing nodes because they will incur a fee by routing that payment. Onion messages, on the other hand, are anonymous and encrypted, right? So they're the same sort of blob that's passed around, but they're not a payment and they don't incur a fee. Okay, so now you're talking about sending arbitrary data across the Lightning network as onion messages, right? Theoretically, sure, it sounds interesting. I'm sure that it will open up to a lot of experimentation and capabilities, which means nodes can create additional capabilities between each other, right? You can basically talk from one node to each other with arbitrary data. This is a slippery slope, though, because, okay, let's do bolts 12, sure. Now someone comes up with another thing that uses onion messages, and now you have to send a bunch more onion messages through your node. And now your bandwidth for your node is seeing not 100 onion messages, just seeing 100,000 being sent through your node, right? So your bandwidth, your network connectivity, your hard drive space, all of that is being increased as a node runner in the network. And then next thing you know, there's another protocol that uses onion messages, and now Lightning has become a general purpose P2P data layer, right? What is my incentive to allow those messages to come through if I'm not being paid for those? If I'm spending money on resources, I need to be paid accordingly for routing messages and payments and data for that. So it is a slippery slope because you never know what's going to happen, right? What if onion messages get adopted and now tons of data is being sent around the network, right? Maybe people won't be able to run those nodes as efficiently, as optimally, and as effectively. So there is some questioning there. There are more nuances as well. I think there are the downside that folks voice on the LNURL side is that it's not the Lightning layer, right? And that's a fair criticism. If you want to stay in the Lightning layer, that's fine. LNURL is not in the Lightning layer. What's interesting is that because it is on the HTTP layer, there are inherently battle-tested technologies that have been built on HTTP. So an example is rate limiting, right? So as a server, if you get DDoSed or attacked, you will have tons and hundreds of millions of requests to your server. You can rate limit. You can say if it's coming from this IP, don't allow requests to come through. If it's coming from this IP, only allow 50 requests, right? You can use battle-tested technologies that have been used in the HTTP layer to scale servers to billions of users. On the Lightning side, not only is Bolt 12 newer, which just like any new technology, I'm sure there's going to be challenges, but you can't do rate limiting, for example, right? The reason for that is the data in the onion messages is encrypted and anonymous. So you don't actually know who it's coming from or where it's going. So now if I have a bunch of data coming through, I can't say, hey, data from this node shouldn't come to me because I don't want them to send junk data to me. Data from this node can come to me. You don't have those capabilities, right? So as a service provider, ZEBEDEE in this case, it is actually very interesting for us to use the HTTP layer because we have technologies, we have battle-tested tools that allows us to scale it and scale it appropriately. That being said, in a world where there is no Bolt 11, which is the normal invoice, and Lightning was created with Bolt 12 from the beginning, I think that would be wonderful, and I think that would have saved us from having to build LNURL, withdraw and pay. I think that would have saved the wallet developers the hassle of building LNURL support, right? That is not the scenario right now. The scenario is Bolt 11, right? So why don't we focus on building invoice orchestration tools, which is what LNURL is, and standards, versus redoing such a massively core piece of what Bolt 12, of what invoices and payments in Lightning are. Those are the two sides, right? Now, Bolt 12 has merits, absolutely. I think it does things that LNURL also does, and so being able to receive funds by scanning a QR code, it's wonderful. We should do that. Being able to pay multiple times on the same static QR code, it's wonderful. We should do that. It just seems to be quite a challenging path to adoption as it stands right now. But I'm excited to see the developments there. There's even a Bolt 12 address thing that was scoped out. The second Lightning address was created, right? So it seems like some ideas are taken from the LNURL side and seeing what works and what doesn't, and then they're trying to bring it into the Bolt 12 specification.
Yeah.
We never know the future, but that's an exciting development there as well.
That's really helpful. One clarifying point there on when Lightning implementations are deciding whether to integrate something, how are they communicating between each other? What's that decision-making process like of whether or not LND is going to adopt Bolt 12 or not?
So I think what's I don't know the intricacies of the internals of each of the companies backing the implementations, right? I'm not part of Lightning Labs or Blockstream or Async, for example. So I don't know the conversations that are being had there. What I know is that there are public PRs, right, pull requests in GitHub repositories. There are Lightning mailing list posts, talking about this and discussions and so forth. Specifically with LND, LND has a separate, potentially alternative for Bolt 12, which is what they've been building with AMP. So there's been multiple parts, right? So there's the key send was one piece, then multi-part payments, MPP was the second piece, and now they have AMP, which is atomic multipath payments. So with AMP, technically, you can have a static QR code, which is what LNURL Pay does, which is what Bolt 12 does, right? So there's competing implementations for similar use cases. And my understanding is that in order to support Bolt 12, there would need to be quite a bit of a refactoring on some core pieces of LND on how it works and so forth. So these companies also all have their own, business needs and models that they're going for. So it's tough to say, hey, the industry has adopted Bolt 12. Let's stop what we're doing and let's adopt Bolt 12. Right? It's a big ask. I do know that C Lightning and Async are implementing. They have actually both implemented Onion messages. They are implementing Bolt 12, and most likely Rust Lightning will as well. So it'll be an interesting dynamic to see what happens then. Does the Lightning Labs team interact with the rest of the team and discuss something? There's an open PR for introduce Bolt 12 support for LND without any code changes. It's just a discussion, sort of pull request or issue, and there have been no comments. Right, and so I think there's been some internal discussions there, but it'll be interesting. I really don't know what's going to happen there, and I'm not privy to the inside discussions of each of the companies. So that's as much as I would know, I think.
So it seems like there are all sorts of different implementations that are trying to build all sorts of different standards and trying to solve all sorts of different use cases on Lightning right now. What do you think about the health of the network in terms of like how these different implementations are communicating with each other, how they're working together to like solve these problems? I know it's a decentralized system, so we want some level of discussion and conversation back and forth. It's not going to be one company just chugging ahead, pushing everything into production. What do you think about the health and the current state, I guess, of Lightning implementations today?
Yeah, so again, as you said, I'm not privy to the internal discussions of each of the teams. So there definitely are, most likely are business motives pushing towards one, implementation or towards the other. An interesting example is, for example, Async they have the Phoenix wallet. And for Phoenix to work, they use these things called trampoline routing payments. This is something that they're pursuing because it is a use case that solves problems for their business, for their purpose, right? So now, are trampoline payments useful? Absolutely, they have their place. But Async and Phoenix are the ones pushing it forward. Now, if it gets adopted and the use grows, will other implementations support it? Will we see other use cases for it? Again, it is a very complicated process to change or to adopt or to introduce other technologies to Lightning. That is one of the reasons why I believe LNURL was built on top of it, because we can experiment and iterate more quickly. I think there are implementations doing different things, which is very interesting. So C Lightning is focusing on being, the enterprise Lightning solution of choice, which means that it can decouple very easily, right? You can have a Postgres database backed by two other Postgres databases. You can have multiple nodes backed by the same node. You can really separate your compute, your cache, your database, which is what's needed to scale enterprise software. So that's one way. LND is it has a slightly more friendly API, right? To have a RESTful interface, to have a gRPC interface, so there's that piece as well. And it can also be compiled to mobile. That's how you have Breeze Wallet and Blixt Wallet and these wallets like that. Async are doing things very differently with Eclair. They're actually focusing on having highly available Lightning nodes. So in an enterprise environment, if you have a server and it crashes, your backup server comes up as one way to simplify it, right? With Lightning, if you're running a Lightning node right now and you don't have that capability, if your Lightning node goes down, technically your funds are at risk, right? Because your Lightning node is not there to secure it and say, hey, you're cheating and you're trying to claim more funds than me. So in an enterprise level, you would need multiple Lightning nodes backing that capability, and you need multiple databases. So Eclair is pursuing a highly available approach is what it's called. LND is moving towards that direction as well. LDK is doing something very different. They're just a very thin Lightning layer that's meant to be coupled into existing Bitcoin wallets, right? So it's a different process and a different use case. So unlike Bitcoin Core, which is the main implementation of Bitcoin, in Lightning Network, we have the ability to experiment and see these capabilities thrive and the implementations thrive. An interesting piece is, just because something gets adopted in an implementation or a set of implementations does not mean it will become extremely used or useful. An example is KeySend. KeySend is very cool, very useful, and I'm able to pay you directly, Kevin, through your Lightning pub key. And there are use cases around podcasting 2.0, right, and Sphinx Chat, for example, which allows you to use KeySend. But if KeySend was to be a massive standard, how come we didn't create QR codes with your pub keys as identifier, right? Because if I have a QR code with your pub key, through KeySend I can pay you, right? So why didn't we move in that direction? Is it because no team moved in that direction, or because no company moved in that direction? Why did we move towards an LNURL pay process? Why did we move towards Lightning address, right? So just because it exists does not mean it will be used or I guess adopted widely in the network. We really have to see what sticks, and I think each team is pursuing their own interests, and it's good, but it does create for the potential for a lot of fragmentation. I guess we have to see how things evolve. As we consume open standards and open networks, my goal is that we continue to support open things and not proprietary, like we do it this way and then you do it that way. Even though they are the same things, we speak differently. And now we go back to the old traditional finance where Venmo and Cash App can talk to each other, but they both speak dollars. So we want Lightning to be interoperable and implementations to communicate with each other, but we also want experimentation, and we want creativity, and we want innovation. So it's a balance, right? It's not really a simple answer there.
Right. Okay, so I guess one more question to finish things off.
Mm-hmm.
What is a technology or an improvement or a standard that you're excited about in 2022 and 2023 on Lightning?
What am I excited about? I think there's been some discussions. There's two pieces that I think are worth discussing. One is the notion of hosted channels, which is basically a Lightning channel that follows the entire specification of Lightning, but it does not have an on-chain footprint. So when you open a Lightning channel, you create a Bitcoin transaction, right? Let's just simplify it that way. And when you close a Lightning channel, the same thing, you go to the blockchain and you sort of settle there. With a hosted channel, you get all the benefits of a Lightning channel, privacy, onion messages, etc., onion routing, and so forth. But it's a trusted model. So an example is Simple Bitcoin Wallet, right? That's a wallet that you can download and get started. Again, in Lightning, you need liquidity. So you need to open channels. You need to have channels open to you in order for you to make payments and receive payments. With a hosted channel, what happens is you sign up, you open your Simple Bitcoin Wallet, and a hosted channel automatically opens with you. A hosted channel is you trusting your wallet provider, right? And you can actually close that channel later on, but what that means is the provider is giving you the ability to send and receive immediately as you open the wallet, right? So that's a great onboarding tool. So hosted channel is exciting, and I think it opens the capability, the possibility for a lot more things, because you don't have the dependency on the blockchain itself, on the Bitcoin layer 1. So, but it is a trade-off, right? You lose the trustlessness aspect of it. It's definitely a trusted setup, but when it comes to custodial providers, when it comes to trusted interactions, maybe it is not that bad of a implementation. So that's one piece that I think is interesting. It's called hosted channels, and actually Alex Bosworth has been discussing similar ideas on Twitter recently. And then the other one that I think is cool is the notion of stateless invoices. So right now, you go to a website and you click pay, and it issues you an invoice with an expiration date, right? Now, imagine in a scenario where you get DDoSed, or you have hundreds of thousands of people paying, directly there. You have a ton of invoices being generated, right? As heavy users of, we use LND, but as heavy users of the LND implementation, the more invoices that are created, the more data is stored in our databases for the invoices, right? I need to keep a record of the database to know who's paying and what is the payment for, and so on and so forth. Stateless invoices mean that the invoice itself can live as a QR code, and it can exist without dampening the performance and the data that's saved in the backend and the Lightning node side, right? So this is something that Used from the BottlePay team has voiced over the mailing list. It's an idea that Fiat Jaff has worked with on the C Lightning side last year, and I would love to be able to just have stateless invoices that can exist and don't have to dampen the performance and the data on the side of the provider, because then you can request 100 million invoices and it will be fine. But if you request a million invoices right now, my database in the node will grow tremendously and everything will start running slower, and I need technical operators to deal with that. In L&D, we call that database compaction. So we're compacting all the time because we're creating so many invoices, and in a world where we have stateless invoices, that sounds very, very cool for me. And then last but not least, any and all advancements in the Lightning address side is very interesting. We talked a lot about it. Some of these new capabilities that will be coming out are very cool, and I look forward to that in 2022.
Awesome. I'm excited to follow along with Lightning addresses, with ZEBEDEE, with all the innovation happening in Lightning. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was an incredible masterclass. Hope we can chat again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. This was a great conversation.
Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Many of the apps and services you already use in the Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystem already use Voltage to scale their business quickly and easily without any maintenance. Voltage also offers an inbound liquidity product called Flow that helps you as a node operator get inbound liquidity quickly and easily. Overall, Voltage is creating the industry standard of non-custodial products, helping brands and startups and entrepreneurs scale. To learn more about Voltage, visit voltage.cloud. All right, let's get into it now. In the last week, we've had 11 different supporters sending in sats to the show. Thank you all for those sats. We also had 8 different episodes supported. So people sent in sats in response to 8 different episodes this week. And we also had 5 messages in just the last couple days since the last episode came out. First up from ThrillerX, says Kevin is fire emoji, lightning emoji, fire emoji, lightning emoji, fire emoji. Kian, let the man talk. That's in response to episode 17 with Kian at Stacker News. I learned a ton from that episode. If you haven't seen it already, check it out, or go check out stacker.news if you want to see what Stacker News is all about. Next up, we had Raven, who sent in 11 sats and says, how old are you? I'm 28. Raven also sent in their Lightning address and was the only comment to include a Lightning address. So they win the 1800 sats. I believe that's Raven's third W. So nice work there. Bobby sent in some comments and said, let's win 1800 sats. Another entry, let's win. Another. That's 3 messages. Bobby, you forgot to put your Lightning address, buddy. All the best for next time, though. I'll do another giveaway this episode. So because it's episode 19, I'm going to give away 1900 sats to any listener. I'll pick one who sends in their Lightning address. The last 3 times or the last 4 times, there's actually only been one person to send in their Lightning address. So your odds are pretty good. But just remember to include a Lightning address because I cannot pay directly within Fountain right now. I hope to see a ton of comments and questions from this episode. I learned so much listening to André talk. And I can't wait to see what you guys send in for questions next week.